Not traveler's breath fogs the forged red tower. Hums in the air is not prayer but the three truths Godhead. The prisons for towers do not house divine will, monuments to a broken pact or hollow shells of the convention of stars. The heart of Lorcan pulsar relic of oaths unraveled, not forged. What hums in the air is not prayer but the Godhead's silent unraveling. The towers do not house regrets. Regrets hold what was never meant to be contained. The towers do not worship, they withhold. Each spire is a shackle, driving into the bedrock of the Orbis, a dream too vast to dream alone. The Ayleid did not build to honor. They built to hold. What did they fear would wake if the Godheads will went unchained? Not heresy, not rebellion, the collapse of all that is. For the Orbis is not a creation, it is a containment, and every archway, every altar, every glyph etched in obsidian, these are not prayers, they are restraints. What if the divine itself was the storm they buried? What if the tower's light is not worship, but the last breath of a god suffocating in its own making? The Ayleid carved their towers from the heart of Lorcan, stone that bled starlight. Their hands, chimer descended, shaped the mundus with a sculptor's greed. The convention of stars left the Orbis shatter at a sky of splinters. To mend it they built, not to honor, to cage. Each spire was a tether, a noose dressed as a pillar. The Godhead's will, wild and unbound, seeped into the cracks of reality. The Ayleid called it devotion. It was something else, a debt unpaid, a wound sutured with stone. They did not know what they buried, only that the world would not hold without them. The towers hum with a hunger that is not theirs. The Orbis breathes through their arches, a lung hooked to a dying god's chest. The Alessian revolt would come centuries later, a storm of ash and scripture. But here in the Dominion's first breath, the Ayleid made their choice. To prop up the sky, they needed to hollow it. To bind the Godhead, they had to become its jailers. What does a god feel when its own creation becomes its shroud? The towers stand, the Orbis holds, and beneath every flagstone the Godhead's will presses against the walls of its prison silent. Waiting, the Ayleid called it salvation. It was the first silence, the first stone, the first breath stolen from a god. The Ayleid did not build to worship, they built to bind. With the heart of Lorcan in their grasp, they raised the white gold tower, its spire piercing the veil between realms. Each stone was a shackle, each archway a noose. The red tower's core, that stolen relic of the convention of stars, pulsed with fractured divinity. It did not glow, it smoldered. A god's throat cut and hollowed. They carved monoliths into the Orbis bones, stitching mundus with threads of mortal will. The towers hummed not with prayers, but with the Godhead's stolen breath. The Ayleid called this ascension, they called it order. They did not hear the silence growing beneath their hymns. The Godhead, split by the convention, had no voice to scream. Its will splintered, seeping into the stone like blood into sand. The Ayleid architects bound these fragments, weaving them into the tower's foundations. What rose was not a monument. It was a vault, a cage of light, the divine dreams trapped within. What were they? Not regrets, not rage, something older, something the Ayleid could not name. The mundus holds because the towers hold. Should their spires crack, the Orbis would unravel. The Ayleid knew this. They built with trembling hands, knowing their salvation was a wound dressed in gold. The red tower's heart beats slower now. The Godhead's essence, compressed into that stone, dreams in silence. Dreams of a time before the convention, before the theft, before the first breath was stolen. Did the Ayleid foresee the cost? Or did they, in their arrogance, believe they could outlast the god they imprisoned? Their cities stand, cold and gleaming, but beneath the marble the Godhead's will stirs, not in anger. In absence, a void where divinity once burned. The Ayleid's triumph is their curse. The towers do not hold the world together, they hold it hostage, and the red tower waits. Waiting for the day its stone heart forgets to beat. The dreaming void hissed at their backs. The Godhead's breath, raw and unchained, threatened to dissolve the Orbis into 1,000 warring echoes. They knew the towers would bind its will but not the price. Each stone they laid stole a fragment of their own divinity. The Ayleid's hands, once radiant with celestial fire, grew cold. The mundus trembled between two deaths, unraveling, or the dragon breaks. What is a world of contradictions? A realm where mountains float and rivers flow backward. Where the sun sets in the east and rises in the west. The dragon breaks are not scars. They are choices the Godhead could not make, the architects chose. They drove the first spire into the dreaming void, not to worship, but to cage. Their cities are not temples, they are anchors, binding the Godhead's will to mortal design. The cost. A silence deeper than death. The Ayleid's voices, once part of the Orbis song, were erased. Their names forgotten. Their cities stand, hollow-eyed, whispering of a war that never was. The Red Tower waits, its heart still beats, but the rhythm is not its own. It pulses to the Godhead's stolen dreams, trapped in a loop of near creation. A world almost made, forever denied its birth. The dragon breaks widen, the towers groan, the Ayleid's choice was never final. It is a debt unpaid, and the Red Tower waits. But to understand what happens next, you must understand what they gave up. The Ayleid's towers are not temples, they are vaults carved from the Orbis's bones. Their essence poured into stone binds the Godhead's will to the mundus. To collapse them is to unmake the world. The Red Tower waits, the debt is not in coin. It is in the silence between stars. The Ayleid did not build their towers to worship, they built to contain. Stone walls hummed with the weight of unspoken names, their spires jagged teeth gnawing at the sky. The Godheads will seeped into mortar, not as divinity, but as a wound left open. To touch the walls was to feel a hunger that had no face, only the echo of a question. Asterisk, what is a god without a body to house it? Asterisk, the red year came as a whisper. Nerevarin's blade struck the heart of Lorcan and the Orbis shuddered. The towers did not fall, they asterisk held asterisk. The mundus, fragile as a breath, clung to the Idra's sacrifice. The Daedra, ever defiant, watched from their void-born perches, but the Ayleid consumed. Their cities became coffins, their architects the first ghosts. No triumph, only the price. At Rurkan's wake, a legion drowned. Not by storm, but by the sea's sudden hunger. The water remembered older gods, it drank their screams and left no bones. A lover, mistaken for a stranger, kissed the wrong cheek. The wrong name, a life unraveled like thread from a broken loom. These were not accidents, they were the arithmetic of containment. The Idra gave themselves to forge a world. The Daedra turned away, the Ayleid gave their souls to chain what should never have been caged. The towers stand, but the architects are dust, their dreams. Trapped in the cracks between stone and star, what does a god do when its prison becomes its home? When the key is lost to time, the red year averted collapse. But what of the silence that followed? The Orbis breathes, but it does not sing. The mundus endures, but its edges fray. The Nerevarin's victory was a stitch in a wound that never heals, and the tower still standing, still asterisk waiting asterisk. What is a vault without a prisoner? What is a god without a name? The Ayleid knew they paid, and the world forgets. The towers breathe, not with life, but with the slow, grinding sigh of stone digesting divinity. Each spire is a throat, each archway a moss-wallowing prayers, spitting back echoes. The Ayleid did not build to worship, they built to bind. Their chisels carved not art, but anchors. Every glyph etched into those walls is a knot in the Godhead's tether, a scar where its will fractured. You can hear it still in the hum of the ruins, not worship, but a shuddering, half-formed whisper, a god trying to remember its own name. The Orbis does not remember history. It remembers stories. A myth is a cage with no bars, a paradox that outlives its lie. The Ayleid knew this. They let their cities rot, let ivy strangle their vaults, so the world would forget they were ever prisons. But stone remembers. The dust in those hollow halls is not dirt, it is the ash of forgotten hymns, the residue of a god's dreams calcifying into guilt. Walk those corridors at dusk and you might see it, a flicker in the shadows, a shape that is not a shape, a figure maybe with too many eyes and no face. It does not watch you, it watches itself. The Dwemer built their machines to pierce the veil. They called it the heart of Lorcan, a shard of divine code to unlock the universe's secrets, but their forges went cold. Their cities sank into the earth, swallowed by stone that bled iron. They too sought to trap the infinitine, found, as the Ayleid did, that a god cannot be dissected without becoming the knife. The heart was not a key, it was a mirror. And when the Dwemer looked into it, they saw what the Ayleid already knew. Transcendence is not escape, it is entrapment. What remains now is not victory, it is a stalemate. The Godheads will fractures in those towers, 1,000 shards of asterisk, almost asterisk and asterisk, never quite asterisk. The Ayleid are dust, their names are dust, but their work endures. The Orbis hums with their paradox, a world built on forgotten promises, where gods are not freed but folded, spindled, and filed away. And in the silence between stars, the vaults keep breathing. waiting not for a prisoner, for a ghost. The lichen-eaten stones still hum. Their song is not worship but a cipher, a language of locks and levers carved to bind what should not be named. The towers, those hollow bones of the first architects, pulsate with a light that does not warm. It is the color of old wounds, the texture of a sigh trapped in amber. Here the air tastes of iron and incantations half remembered. The Oribus, that myth-woven scaffold of all things, permits these contradictions to breathe. It lets the towers stand as both tomb and cradle, their spires threading the veil between what was and what might never have been. The mundus, that fragile stage of stars and shadow, trembles on its axis. Not from collapse but from the weight of what it carries, oaths etched in blood and dust kept by stones that remember. The Ayleid are gone, but their craft endures. Their cities are not ruins, they are thresholds patience made permanent. The Godhead's will, that unruly fire, does not rage here. It simmers folded into the geometry of archways, the angles of collapsed roofs. A prisoner, no, a collaborator. The pact was never to contain divinity, it was to outlast it. The land scars itself to keep the balance, crops wither near the towers, birds circle in patterns that predate flight, and deep in the earth, where roots dare not reach, something shifts. Not awake, not yet, but dreaming. The wind carries a whisper now, not a warning, a waiting. 197 words. The Dwemer carved upward toward the stars, the Ayleid carved downward into the bones of the world. One sought to unshackle the mundus, the other sought to chain it. Their tools were different, their hunger was the same. The Dwemer's heart of Lorcan pulsed with stolen divinity, a key to unlock the veil. It vanished them. The Ayleid's towers pulse with stolen silence, a cage for what should never be contained. What remains of the Dwemer are questions without answers. What remains of the Ayleid are answers without questions. Their cities are not ruins, they are scars. Each spire a splinter in the Oribus, each foundation a knot in the fabric of time. To walk their streets is to stand between two breaths, what was and what might unbecome. The Dwemer reached too high, the Ayleid reached too deep. Both touched the edges of the Godhead's will. Both were erased, yet the Ayleid's work endures. Their vaults hum with a weight no god intended to be held. Not regrets, not bargains, something older, something that does not need to escape, only wait. The wind still whispers at their walls, not a voice, a vacuum, a hunger in reverse. The towers do not trap the divine, they trap the absence of it. The price of binding a god is not in the binding, it is in the keeping, and the keeping is eternal. The Ayleid knew this. They built their prisons not to imprison gods, but to imprison the cost. The towers are not monuments, they are mortgaged stone. Each brick a down payment on a debt no mortal can pay, and the interest is what stirs in the roots. The Dwemer carved upward toward the stars, the Ayleid carved downward into the bones of the world. One sought to unshackle the mundus, the other sought to chain it. Their tools were different, their hunger was the same. The Dwemer's heart of Lorcan pulsed with stolen divinity, a key to unlock the veil. It vanished them. The Ayleid's towers pulse with stolen silence, a cage for what should never be contained. What remains of the Dwemer are questions without answers. What remains of the Ayleid are answers without questions. Their cities are not ruins, they are scars. Each spire a splinter in the Oribus, each foundation a knot in the fabric of time. To walk their streets is to stand between two breaths, what was and what might unbecome. The Dwemer reached too high, the Ayleid reached too deep. Both touched the edges of the Godhead's will. Both were erased, yet the Ayleid's work endures. Their vaults hum with a weight no god intended to be held. Not regrets, not bargains, something older, something that does not need to escape, only wait. The wind still whispers at their walls, not a voice, a vacuum, a hunger in reverse. The towers do not trap the divine, they trap the absence of it. The price of binding a god is not in the binding, it is in the keeping, and the keeping is eternal. The Ayleid knew this. They built their prisons not to imprison gods, but to imprison the cost. The towers are not monuments, they are mortgaged stone. Each brick a down payment on a debt no mortal can pay, and the interest is what stirs in the roots. What if the Ayleid's pact was a prison, not a throne? The Godhead's will, caged in holy towers, now breaks free. Numidium's gears, fueled by Mantella's bound soul Tibers or Zurin's threaten to unravel.